and welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. This episode is called The Best, the Worst and the Greatest Comeback. We'll be learning about a couple of the Premier League's best seasons a team has ever had, one of the worst seasons a team has ever had, and one of the greatest comebacks out of the relegation zone a team has ever had. Before we do that, we need to do some shout-outs and some messages. And the first one is from Angus, who's aged 6 and is from Eastleigh. He plays for the Falcons at Stoneham Park. And Angus says, please can we have an episode on Bruno Fernandes, because he is a really good player for Portugal. Or an episode on FIFA. That would be really cool. Well, thank you very much for your message, Angus, and hello to everybody in your team, the Falcons at Stoneham Park. I hope that you're all really enjoying your football and scoring some cracking goals. And thank you for your requests. I've got to say, an episode on FIFA is a brilliant idea. So I've stuck that one on the list of the ones I absolutely must write. The next one is a big shout out to Hugo, who's a big fan of the podcast, and he also wants to do a big shout out to his football loving mate Marcus, who also listens to the podcast. So a big hello to you two, and thank you for being listeners. The next one is a big hello and a shout out to Joseph, who says, please can you do an episode on Gabriel Martinelli, who plays for Arsenal. I would like to know about what things he has won and the teams that he has played for. I really enjoyed the podcast and I feel very excited when there is a new one on my Yoto. I play for my school team called KDW Sports, and we won a shield last week and I had my own medal. I had a football party with my friends for my birthday because football is my favourite thing. And that is from Joseph, age 7. So thank you very much for your message, Joseph. And hello to all of your teammates and your coaches at KDW Sports. And the penultimate one on this episode comes from Will in Australia, who's 7 years old and says that he loves the podcast. He'd love for me to do an episode about Jamie McLaren, the best Australian striker, and some other brilliant Australian players. So I've actually got Jamie McLaren on my list of ones that I need to write. So I better get on with one of those soon. Thank you very much, Will, and it's great to know that we've got listeners all the way over in Australia. Good day, mate. I hope you have a cracking day. Sorry about my Australian accent, I was just trying to give it a go. And the final one on this episode goes to Hevenika, who's a big fan of the podcast and has made the effort to write a proper letter on paper. And I've got to say, the handwriting is absolutely superb. It says, Dear Darren, I love your podcast. My name is Hevenika. I'm a great fan of Arsenal. Please, can you do an episode on Odegaard? I'm 5 years old. I'm going to be 6 in March. I play football every Friday at school. My coach is Ian. I got the trophy for playing well. One day, I want to play football for Arsenal. I live in Barnet, England. Please, can you read my letter? And did you get my answer? Which I think she's talking about from the competition. I did. You definitely went into the competition. Thank you, Darren, from Hevenika. Well, thank you very much. What a lovely letter to receive. That is brilliant stuff. Thank you to everybody who's reached out and sent a message this week. I really appreciate it. If you want to get in touch, send a shout out to your football teammates, your coaches, put a request in or whatever it is. You can ask an adult to send an email to footballforkidspodcast@gmail.com. Right then, let's get on with this episode. One of the greatest seasons a Premier League has ever had came from Manchester City a few years ago, in the season which went across 2017 and 2018. Did you know that in that season, Manchester City hit the century and finished the season with 100 points? No other team in the history of the Premier League has ever won 100 points in one season. In that season, Manchester City ended up winning the Premier League, being clear of second-place team Manchester United by a whopping great 19 points. Out of their 38 games, they won 32 games, drew 4 and only lost 2. The two teams that they lost to were Manchester United and Liverpool. Manchester City had some squad and some serious goal scorers. Over their 38 games, they scored 106 goals. Sergio Aguero scored 21, Raheem Sterling scored 18, Gabriel Jesus banged 13 in, and the remaining 54 goals were banged in by many of their other brilliant players. Another incredible season, which will go down in the history as one of the greatest Premier League seasons of all time, was the one which Arsenal had in 2003 and 2004. The manager, who is another of the great football managers, Arsene Wenger, set out at the start of a season to win every game. He was fed up of Manchester United and Alex Ferguson winning everything. Arsenal were 5 games into the season with 1 draw and 4 wins. The goal of winning every game was gone, but could Arsenal go an entire season without getting beaten once? The last team to do this was Preston North End, and that was all the way back in 1889. Arsenal's 6th game of the season was against the dreaded Manchester United. It wasn't long before Arsenal were down to 10 men, as Patrick Vieira was sent off. Vieira was an Arsenal legend and now is the Crystal Palace manager. The game was 0-0 going into extra time, and 93 minutes gone, Manchester United were awarded a penalty, and a goal-scoring machine stepped up to take the pen for Man United. Ruud van Nistelrooy. He smashed the ball so hard that it hit the underneath of the crossbar and bounced out. Arsenal couldn't believe their luck. The game ended 0-0, and Arsenal were now 6 games and still unbeaten. Arsenal went on to win game after game with their top man Thierry Henry banging goals in left, right and centre. After 33 games and not a single defeat, it was the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham. Arsenal only needed a draw to win, and they still had 4 games to play. The game ended 2-2, and Arsenal were the Premier League champions. However, there were still 4 games to go. Could they really go a whole season without being beaten? Something which hadn't been achieved for 115 years? They drew against Birmingham and then against Portsmouth. They beat Fulham 1-0, and the last game of the season, Arsenal played Leicester at home. And after 26 minutes, they went 1-0 down. Could Leicester ruin the party and stop Arsenal from doing it? Stop Arsenal from making history? Nope. Thierry Henry scored a penalty, and then Patrick Vieira scored the winner. Arsenal had won. They'd done it. The first to go an entire season unbeaten in 115 years. Now, they were a couple of the best seasons known in the Premier League. What about one of the worst ones? Unfortunately, Derby County fans, get your fingers and stick them in your ears. It was the 2007-2008 season, and out of 38 games, Derby County only won 1 game. Yep, just the one. That game was a 1-0 win against Newcastle. They drew 8 games and they lost a whopping great 29 games. They got beaten 6-0 by Liverpool, 5-0 by Arsenal, 5-0 by West Ham, 6-0 by Villa, and beaten well and truly by all the other teams as well. Derby finished bottom of the league with only 11 points, and it was the worst Premier League season by any team in the history of the league. And one of the most bonkers bounce backs of the Premier League was Leicester in 2015. The year before, they were in the Championship and they won the Championship. Leicester were in the Premier League now and gunning to make it a success. Leicester had a couple of good wins to start with, but they ended up losing too many games. In fact, they didn't get a win for 13 matches at one point. In November of that year, they found themselves rock bottom of the Premier League and 7 points from getting out of the relegation zone with only 9 games left in the season. It was looking definite that Leicester would be back off to the Championship after being in and around the relegation zone for over 4 months. Leicester started to fight back though, and they beat West Ham 2-1 at home. The Leicester crowd went absolutely bonkers. Then they went to West Brom and beat them 3-2. They beat Swansea, Burnley, Newcastle, Southampton. They drew with Sunderland, and then they finished off the season with a whopping great 5-1 win at home to QPR. Leicester, who looked almost certain to be on their way back down to the Championship, performed one of the greatest escapes in the Premier League history. What a turnaround. Leicester City ended up being 14th in the league. So if your team is currently rock bottom of the league, hopefully it gives you a little bit of hope that there is a chance that they could do what Leicester did. I hope you've enjoyed listening and learning about the best, the worst, and one of the greatest comebacks. And remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly, or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.